Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening to the 5th anniversary celebration of the School of Transform. My name is Dan Cairo. I am a fan of the college, and it is a privilege that I get to be here in this conversation. It's also a special treat. This has never been done before, so you'll have an opportunity to hear from faculty, department chairs, as well as the Dean of the School of Transform. That being said, I would like to introduce Dean Stockton. How are you?
I'm well, Dan. Really appreciate your being here. We want to be with a fan, so we're with a fan, which is great. Yes, let me also introduce my comrades here. So this is Professor Wanda Pillow, who is chair of the Division of Gender Studies. And Wanda researches and teaches qualitative research methods, God bless her for doing so, also race, feminism, and post-structuralist theory, and educational policy. And she's also serving as the co-editor of our journal, Frontiers. And then we have also Professor Edmund Fong, who is chair of the Division of Ethnic Studies. And Edmund is jointly appointed in the Division of Ethnic Studies and the Department of Political Science, and studies and teaches broadly how racial politics affect the development of American political culture and American political institutions. So these are my scholar leaders.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. Part of the treat tonight is to really get to hear from you all and engage in this conversation about, where Transform started 5 years ago, where we are now, where you hope to go in the future. So I think it's going to be great. So why don't we get started, right? Let's do this. So when you look back at, your time at Transform, what makes you the most proud, and what's your favorite story to tell?
Well, I think I'll start with that because I have a very definitive story to tell.
Okay.
And I mean, there are many things that make me proud about the college. So I mean, I could brag on these folks all day long, and I probably will do a little more bragging later on about who is in the school. But I think the thing that makes me proudest about the school is we can truly say that it was student voices that opened the opportunity to propose this college. And I think that's a very rare story in this country, that it was students who came together, and now I will tell the story that is my favorite story, who came together in November 2015 for an open dialogue on racial climate at the university. We were one of those institutions who actually asked to have a dialogue with campus, and folks came. And somewhere between 300 and 600 people came to the Student Union Ballroom to have this discussion. And I have to say I had a little bit of a heartache because I felt once again we're asking largely students of color, queer students of color, students of a range of abilities and disabilities to come together and tell largely white administrators what they're needing and what seems to be going on in terms of racial climate at this predominantly white institution. And I was worried about asking people to do that yet again. And if the institution was not going to respond, how dispiriting that would be, how unfair it would be. But students came and very bravely stood, spoke, gave their wisdom, made demands. And coming out of the ballroom that day, so I was serving as the Associate Vice President for Equity and Diversity, and President Dave Pershing and Senior Vice President Ruth Watkins asked me to draw up a list that became known as 13 immediate responses to the open dialogue on racial climate that would be responsive to what we heard. And so there are many things on that list, but lucky number 13 was permission to propose a brand new college to be built around ethnic studies and gender studies. And partly the students had said in that ballroom, we're worried that ethnic studies is going to be defunded on this campus, that things are going to roll back as they were starting to be rolled back across the country. And I felt, and fortunately Dave and Ruth both felt, that the strongest message we could send to our campus would be to try to produce this college. They couldn't wave a wand to make it happen. So we actually had to go through 6 decision-making bodies and get a majority vote at each of those bodies to be able to propose this college. And we settled it. We thought that's going to be a 5-year process for sure. And I also want to say, though the students, I would say, kicked that door open for the opportunity, the faculty in the school had to do a tremendous amount of labor, and even our own students in gender and ethnic studies, to really sort of mount this proposal. And to make a long story short, and for reasons I still don't understand, we went through all 6 decision-making bodies in a 6-month period without a single negative vote. And in fact, I will never forget at the Board of Regents, so towards the end is the Academic Senate, Board of Trustees, Board of Regents, And at the Board of Regents, so we were on the consent calendar, so it was going to happen. I remembered that they turned to Ruth Watkins and to me and said, would you like to say some words? Because this is a historic moment, really in the state of Utah, to be able to have a school for cultural and social transformation. So that's my favorite story, and the students on that day and our activist students in general make me exceedingly proud.
Wow, that is a great story.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's great. So when you reflect back on that and when we hear that, what are your hopes for, the college in the next 5 years? What are you, what gets you excited about the future?
Okay, that is my favorite question. And I've got a list of ideas.
Right.
It was hard to narrow this down.
Yeah.
So, but I did, and I will try. So I'm going to share some initial thoughts here on this. And my colleagues haven't heard this yet. So,
Right.
yeah. So here's what I'm thinking. In 5 years or sooner, I see Transform as really being the central to intersectional studies at the university. And I think we're also going to be getting attention within the Pac-12 for what we're doing here. I also see a vibrant, engaged community of scholars doing cutting-edge, intersectional, decolonial, and social justice work. I also see students, because students are at the heart of what we do, and at the heart, as you just heard, of why we even became a school to begin with. So I see students funded to pursue their studies and pursue their research. I see community engaged learning and internships are going to remain central. I see, since we've become a school, part of the things that I'm so impressed by are our faculty have developed interdisciplinary programs that are really crucial to campus. So Pacific Island studies and disability studies, those are going to flourish and grow. And I see our school developing a more formalized relationship with the Utah Education Prison Program. And I also see that we're going to have growth and focus and hiring we got this on tape now, you all, so hiring in queer, Black, and Indigenous feminisms, because that's just our intersectional way forward there. And in addition to that, I would love to see us develop some sort of policy center or some sort of publication that really highlights the work we're doing in Transform, and we get it out to our communities to put it into practice. And at the same time, I think we're going to continue being, having a leadership role both on campus and in community on ideas and needs for campus and community. But there's something else central to the school that won't go away. We're always going to be the place and space where we have critical conversations about the complexities of studying intersectional identities, about living in the worlds that we live in, and about what it means to live with these intersectional identities. And okay, that's a short list of where we're at, for 5 years. And what's exciting is a lot of that, I would say, we're already doing on a daily basis.
Yes.
This is where the commitment and the work of our faculty, our staff, and our students are right now.
Right, that's so true.
That is so energizing. I don't know if you want to add something.
I
before
did want to add to that, and building on what Wanda said. I mean, I think we need to sort of look at the past, I think, in order to understand kind of the significance of, and excitement about where we might go. We had the occasion a couple of years ago in 2019 to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the creation of the discipline of ethnic studies back in 1969. And we had an array of former faculty, administrators, staff, and students. And two things emerged from that. I think that really sort of informed sort of my hopes for the next 5 years. One was the theme of insurgent knowledge. That was a common sort of thread that lay at the foundations of the discipline, creation of the discipline of ethnic studies. It's captured by what Kathryn was saying about how students created the school in recent years. The idea that there was a hunger for certain bodies of knowledge that spoke to the lived experiences of people back then and ongoing today. that aren't captured in traditional scholarly approaches. And so that insurgent knowledge was a sort of theme that came across in our celebration, and it informs, I think, sort of our expectations and excitement about what Transform can go, where it can go in the future. The second major theme was something that surprised us in the recollections of, again, the various faculty, administrators, staff, and students of the past, was how we all often found ourselves to ethnic studies in roundabout ways. It wasn't ready-made knowledge that was there for us. It was the fact that the questions that we had, the burning curiosity around the issues of the day we faced, weren't being sort of captured, right, in what we were learning. And the need to come together and build ethnic studies by many hands to provide that sort of knowledge that captures our own lived experiences, that informs the worlds we inhabit and live in, that you won't find in other traditional disciplines. That I think really is a sort of guiding thread, two threads for ethnic studies, and now with the school in our 5-year anniversary, in new and innovative and dynamic ways. So I fully expect and hope that Transform will continue to sort of blaze those pathways to develop new insurgent sort of founts of knowledge, to capture those burning questions of the day and the curiosity of our students, how to pave the way in the manner in which we found ourselves drawn to, say, ethnic studies and intersectional inquiry, where we're learning, searching for things that we don't find in existence, and paving the way for other students now to find those avenues.
And I think everything that the chairs have just shared is really key to our strategic plan. So one of the very exciting things that will happen in the fall is we will do this search for a new hire in Black feminist studies. And that person will be jointly appointed in ethnic studies and gender studies. We couldn't do that before we were college because they were both programs. So now that they're actual departments, so they're called divisions, they'll be able to do that partnering. And I think that will be keeping faith, I hope, with some of the passions that we heard from Black Student Union, over the last year, of really feeling, and it must happen on this campus, that we grow Black studies.
Right.
We can't just imagine that we've got some fantastic faculty on this campus. We have to press forward and we have to add more scholars doing Black studies. So that actually has been the #1 goal in the school. And then I'll just mention, because it's very exciting, we have 2 melons that we're actually working on right now. So we received the first ever academic Mellon grant in the history of the University of Utah, and that was for Pacific Island Studies. So I have to say that makes me very happy and proud that linked to the Mellon Foundation, and the first ever will always be our Pacific Island Studies, which was something that this campus desperately needed because we're blessed with tremendously rich populations in our valley. The other thing I would say that I feel passionate about, and I hope will be taken up by the university, is environmental anti-racism. It's something that we've been talking about every chance we get. If you think again where we live, right? We had this tremendous problem with pollution, and we also really need to be addressing urgent issues from communities of color in this valley. And those two issues, oh, by the way, are completely and utterly connected.
Right.
As I often say, this is the rare place where you can look out, and when you see that line across the valley of bad air, you are seeing racism hanging in the air. And I don't think anybody should believe that environmental issues, aren't just a white thing unless we're really linking it to serious anti-racist activities and policy. So that's another thing we're doing. And last thing I'll say, because I can now say this, because I just accepted this invitation the other day on behalf of Transform, we have been asked by the Mellon Foundation to mount a proposal to have a new intersectional studies collective that would be based at the University of Utah. We are one of only 5 universities in the nation to be invited to do this. We don't know if we can make it to that high bar of expectation, but we are certainly going to try. So all the chairs are both talking about in terms of intersectionality. We are being recognized for this opportunity. And in the letter of invitation, what they stated was this tremendous faculty that has been built, the experts that we have on campus. So I'm pretty excited about that. And may I just say a last word about disability studies, because we haven't yet mentioned them, and we are so proud that after we became a college, disability studies that was sort of scattered across the university, being run by some really great older women who needed to retire, got reconstituted and moved into Transform, and it's being run by two terrific people, Angela Smith and Leslie Fry. They've already doubled the number of minors, doing tremendous work. We are very committed to grow disability studies on our campus as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, Evan. I'd like to
No,
say
I was
something.
just going to say, I mean, one of your earlier questions about, what is our, most surprising story that we have to tell. And it's not a story so much for me as a sort of experience, a common experience when I tell people about Transform. It's exactly the sort of dynamism. We've had 7 new faculty just in the past few years in ethics studies alone. And whenever I share this sort of news about what we're up to here, right, there's always a look of bewilderment or incredulity, right? Here in Utah, right?
Yeah.
And so that look of bewilderment, surprise, incredulity never gets old. It gives me enormous sort of pleasure.
Yeah.
So,
I love
yeah.
that.
There
Yeah.
is really, it is, we cannot overstate how historic it is to have the school. And I thought that you laid out really well in the interview that's up on At the U, right?
Mm-hmm.
This history and that ethics studies and gender studies have been on campus. But we were also just relocated from whatever building, right? From whatever, I was like finding spare offices. Faculty
So
didn't
true.
have offices, right? So we were never even in
For sure.
the same place. And what the school has done is it's created another kind of collaboration between 2 units with distinct histories and distinct identities that we want to hold on to and honor, but that also have these wonderful ways we can intersect because we have the same goals, right?
Yeah.
And visions too. And without being a school, we would not have that kind of possibility that we've been having to think together, do hiring together, get invites from Mellon. That's only become possible because, and I would say it like this, faculty also took the risk to come into a school because none of us knew how that was going to work.
That's right.
It felt risky.
Yeah.
It felt like, are we going to quote unquote be giving up our identity? Those are real conversations that we've had, and if we're just going to be real here, sometimes like we look at gender and ethics studies in academia, sometimes we don't see them playing well together, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just so thankful that there had been enough leadership here to help make this school possible, that there was enough kind of commitment to do some of this work together, and that our faculty 5 years ago voted, right? We had deep, intense conversations about this and had to vote, and it felt risky. It really did, Dan. Like none of us were sure this would actually work.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad and thankful that you all leaned in, that you had the conversation and make it happen. One of the things that's coming up for me as you're sharing all of this is, I guess I'm hanging my hat on this, and is that people are leaning in, faculty, making connections with the Mellon Foundation, which is huge, by the way. Congratulations, you heard it here first, right? But it all comes down to this thing that was mentioned, right, which is ethics studies, gender studies, disability studies, right? And so, coming to this place of answering the burning curiosities of the day, that is so important and crucial, right? I mean, thinking together, whether we're faculty or students in a classroom or outside, that is such an important quality and much needed function of existing in the community. And I mean, Transform is making that happen. So this is why I'm a fan, because it's an ability to, answer those questions, not just from knowledges that have been left out, but also it's developing a skill and a passion for thinking and learning. So thank you all for doing that, which then brings me to this question, right? So what has been your favorite class to teach?
So I'm fully appointed in gender studies now, which again, unless this was a school, I wouldn't even be able to have, right? This kind of position on campus. and I'm able to teach upper level undergraduate courses, but also teach graduate courses for the Gender Studies graduate certificate. And what this allows me to do is every semester I get to sit with key text and key issues, concepts, debates, and ideas that are occurring in intersectional feminist theory. And we were talking before we started taping, right, about some of our pedagogies and what we've done, and it's included everything from, I've done dress up in my classes, we've gone to drag shows, we've danced, and I also like putting theory into practice in the classroom too. And that might mean sometimes we've done insurgent art, right, across campus. And I know many of our colleagues in Transform, they do incredible things pedagogically that I keep being inspired by. So I'm not really talking about my favorite. I think I'm talking about what it feels like to teach, yeah, in Transform. And one of my, one of my best memories of teaching was with a class where a few years ago, we were sitting with Gloria Anzadulas and Cherry Moragas, This Bridge Called My Back. And I wanted us to be able to hold the text, and the original text is hard to get, so I had been locating and buying up copies as much as I could, and then had enough that we could sit in a circle each class period and hold that text in our hands, sometimes sharing with a classmate, and we read out loud to each other for about 20 minutes of every class period. And there was just something so beautiful and formative about that kind of praxis in pedagogy that it still continues to impact how I approach teaching. And I could not do those kinds of practices, right, in another disciplinary area. It may not be welcome to go do the dress up, right, or go do the insurgent artwork, or to sit and do a choral out loud reading as a part of class. So Transform really, again, provides the space for our faculty to just be the most creative, effective, and productive with their pedagogy.
Yeah, I mean, before I stepped in as chair, I used to teach a class for ethnic studies on American racism. And, you know, obviously it's a very sort of serious, trenchant course. It focuses on spectacle lynchings of the 19th and 20th century. But it's a course that never gets the sort of serious attention and engagement that it deserves, right? I mean, it's something that's kind of slips between, you know, other disciplines, or is put in a category as too sort of touchy or difficult to sort of, you know, address. And I've always been sort of grateful that the students have found that course really illuminating, not just in understanding the past and the horrors of the past, but also in sort of in the thought-provoking questions it raises for how we think about, you know, racism and racial violence today, which obviously we're in a time of deep ferment around. And, you know, there are interesting dimensions for them to think about, right, around, you know, the parallels between the sort of changing media landscapes back then in the late 19th and early 20th century, when you had the development of the handheld camera, Polaroid camera, and the role that that played in sort of proliferating spectacle lynchings, and our environment today with the rise of social media and film videos of, you know, lethal shootings and violence of African Americans and others. So I think, you know, I like the class, and I think I've always been sort of gratified that students don't just get attention to a topic that is often not addressed fully, but also are able to think through it in really sort of thought-provoking ways, beyond just the sort of horrors of that and whatnot, and in intersectional ways as well. So that's a class, again, I haven't had the chance to be able to teach since I've stepped in as chair, but that's something that I certainly want to find opportunities to offer again. I would love to teach that, and I think obviously our times, you know, sort of call for more classes like that.
I think it tells you something as you hear administrators longing to be teaching, you know. And I will say, I mean, I love to write. I love the research side of these jobs. It seems like an enormous privilege. But I really do believe it's, you know, crazy as it sounds, it's corny, but it is true that students do report having their lives change by the courses that they take, right? And I was trying to think, I can't think of any other profession where you get to think with people for 15 weeks at a time. And you have this incredibly intense intellectual, emotional connection with each other, and then you have to stop, and now you need to start doing that with the next group of people for 15 weeks. You know, it's almost promiscuous in a very strange way. You know, as I always say to my students, okay, now we have to stop doing this with each other, and we have to start doing it with other people. You know, so the university kind of requires this intellectual promiscuity from us, which I think we're happy to deliver on. And I would just mention my two favorite courses. So for quite a while on the theory side, I was teaching the semiotics of race to the English department because my full appointment is in English. So I'm not even jointly appointed. I'm sort of been on loan from the English department for a long time. And then queer theory. So I started teaching queer theory right when queer theory was born, as it were, in 1990. And I'm very happy that the University of Utah was really on that train early on. And I think partly because I don't know if this would have struck me as much if I'd gone to a different institution, but coming as a white, queer, and genderqueer professor to the University of Utah, and I put this in my piece in At the U, I was rather shocked that white students here had not really been asked to think about their own racial formation, hadn't been invited into that exploration and curiosity, which is good for any human being, you know, particularly in this country. So I was very determined that queer theory, in my queer theory in 1990, was not going to be a course of white authors, but we were going to be reading broadly and actually bringing people into the course who are generally not considered queer theorists. I don't know what Toni Morrison would say to learn that she has been a queer theorist in my class, you know. James Baldwin, you could imagine, you know, in that domain. But it is to say that I think this whole field now that we recognize as queer of color critique, which I am part of professionally, was something that I think we were really trying to develop on our own in 1990 at the University of Utah. And that's that intersectional focus. I think all of us that have been drawn to this school had been teaching intersectionally in our own lives, and we're kind of longing for this get-together of ethnic studies and gender studies. And I would just add that, yeah, my surprise was that it's worked. You know, not even so much that we have it, but that it works. Because you could have it, and trust me, in the early days, there were moments where I would just like wake up in bed and think, what were we thinking? You know, this may not be easy to pull off. And I want to give a big shout out to Edmund Yos, who was the chair of ethnic studies at the time, and Susie Porter, who was chair of gender studies, because they really had to make those early days work. And they had to do a lot of thinking and talking with each other. And I think they brought us to a very good and very strong place. And I credit those two individuals with doing tremendous work with each other. Because my surprise is not so much that we did it, that was tremendously surprising, but that it's working so well, like genuinely so well across the divisions.
But listening to you both talk about courses just emphasizes that in Transform we do get to focus, and we can do a deep dive focus and engagement around a concept and issue that wouldn't get taught in another disciplinary area,
Yeah,
right?
true.
And that's so
Yep.
important. And I've spent 2 semesters doing seminars just on intersectionality. That was our key
Yeah.
term, because it's a word, we've mentioned it how many times today, right? But what do we actually know about intersectionality? What is our genealogy of intersectionality? And those classes have been, again, both really formative for the students, and I think, excuse me, provided good information. But we also ended up in Transform doing a faculty book reading and book
Yes.
talk. We read
Yes.
Jennifer Nash's new book on intersectionality, and then joined together to have a book talk about it. And so it's those kinds of deep dives,
Yes.
right, on,
Yes.
on a crucial topic or issue or history is what we can provide in Transform too.
And we learn from each other.
Yeah, yeah.
It's an open question.
We did that book talk during COVID, so it was on Zoom, and I would say it was one of our best Zoom
Yeah.
gatherings
Yeah.
and meetings. But
Yeah.
I think it's also important, I mean, most of us were probably in academia when it was referred to as women of color feminisms, and I still
Right.
use that term. And I think it's important to remember that women of color feminisms, which includes indigenous feminisms,
Yes.
includes Black, Chicana,
Yes,
Asian,
absolutely.
diaspora feminisms, that was about theory, right? But it was also always about relationality, being in praxis. It was about healing. It was about survival, but it was also about action,
Yeah.
every time too. So I tend to still retain that term, women of color, although now I think, people prefer BIPOC, right? And I get that, but for me, I just hold on to that term, women of color, and then tend to explain to students the genealogy of that term. But I do want us to always remember that also always includes indigenous feminisms, and that our, when we go back to 1970s Black feminisms and Black lesbian feminist thought, then, these weren't scholars and activists, weren't poets and essayists thinking in isolation.
Absolutely.
They were thinking with each other. And we've just begun to learn that history too, of writing letters to each other, being in correspondence. And I think that's a good example for how we can practice academia and scholarship now.
That's what I meant by, insurgent knowledge is sort of one of the central themes that came out in our 50th anniversary celebration. It was putting ourselves in relationship to sort of the struggles and efforts of people in the past, and sort of the pride in sort of carrying that torch in ever new ways, but honoring that they were crafting new knowledge, and that required sort of questioning their own sort of preconceived understandings. And that's something that I take to heart, that we always have to be open to questioning our own sort of settled assumptions about things together, right? In sort of gracious ways.
What would you say are some of the lessons learned as you've engaged in this, 5-year project, right? To bring together, these knowledges, ways of thinking, and being together. What are some lessons that you can pull?
Well, I've thought about this. I know for sure, hands down, the greatest lesson that I have learned is really about staff. It's about staff importance and staff brilliance. And I think that's something, sadly, faculty are not really encouraged to understand. We as faculty, when we come into universities, we're very heads down, we're doing our research, we're doing our teaching, building our service record, and we sometimes can imagine ourselves as these sort of independent actors, shaping our destiny. And I think it is very easily forgotten by rank and file faculty that staff are the backbone of the whole institution.
Right.
And sometimes university discourse looks like it's playing some sort of badminton game, over the heads of staff. So it's about students, it's about faculty-student relations, and all of that is enormously important. But if you don't have staff who really are bringing their expertise every single day, bringing their passion, working long days, there all day, on the old model, nothing is going to be working. And I really learned this when I was in Office for Equity and Diversity. That was really the training ground where I saw staff who were so expert, so activist, in their own ways, and had such incredible wisdom. So yes, there were people with leaders, there were leaders with big titles, but it was really the staff who knew what had to be done on the campus and were so near and dear to the students' hearts that was just a big wake-up call for me, that we should do everything in our power to be a staff-forward campus. It would be very exciting if the University of Utah decided that is going to be where we put a lot of heart and energy and focus, because that is simply a fact of who is doing tremendous labor. And I think in the school, it's one of the things that we really try to honor. I think of some of our staff people, our Assistant Dean Estella Hernandez, Jen Wozap, who's doing our advising. I think of Pat Ross, I think of Maria Morales. I think just what incredible labor is being done there that keeps the school running every day. So for me, I really put that down as my biggest lesson. Yeah.
Thank you for deciding that. Well, maybe one more question. So we can put it in. Hopefully, sneak this in, because I think it's rich conversation. If you're joining us, you're probably also excited about hearing the different components and dimensions of thinking and being in the school to transform. And so, what would you all say is one of the opportunities for students and alums when they connect with the transform?
I guess I'll start us off on that. I mean, I think getting, a common thread in all of the things we've said, if you are a student who, really wants to sort of grapple with the burning issues of the day, that you are curious about, that, are aspects of your own lived experiences or in sort of worlds that you inhabit, that you're not going to get, a real, true, full range sort of understanding of that in other schools or colleges. We are interdisciplinary to the core. We always have been, ethnic studies and gender studies, and now with Transform. And you're not going to get the range of perspectives that, on any of these sort of major topics, whether it's sort of environmental racism or climate change or indigenous movements for self-determination. You're not going to get those, in other schools or colleges. And so I think we offer something that's unique, not just sort of broad in range, but also timely, often marginalized, emergent, even prophetic, insurgent, as we've been talking about. And so I think that is an enormous advantage that we have for any student who might be, trying to understand the world we live in, but also where we might be going, where we should be going. And for those alums who are out there transforming the world as we speak, hopefully we will have provided them the means to sort of, grapple with sort of those, threads, fragile threads of the present that are alive right now, emergent, but perhaps not being sort of attended to in the ways that they ought to be.
Yeah, you think about the kinds of conversations, right, we've just been having in the United States over the past 18 months. And a lot of the debates and the issues, right, that are just now getting attention and just now being maybe more paid attention to by a general population, our students have been immersed, right, in those conversations for their schooling.
Yeah.
And they have experiential, theoretical, and practical knowledge, right, of how to address.
Yes.
I mean, our students can be educators, facilitators, activists, and again, can be finding ways to invite people in to these really important conversations, and also be there for each other and find their communities, right, to do that activism. And I think, I just imagine Transform students, like you were saying, out there in the world, right? That gives me great pleasure and hope to think about that. And I would also just say to alums, or any students who are just graduating, and Edmund, you said this so eloquently at graduation in 2019, that I repeated it at this year's graduation, that Transform, we're still there for you. Your staff, your advisors, your faculty, your fellow students, and we would love to hear from our alums about how you're doing, where you're doing the work, right? But we're also there to listen and support too.
And I would add to that, I think we're easy to know, and so I was going to say, one of the benefits is, for folks to get to know, I think, a remarkable group of people. So now this is me, bragging on the faculty. Yeah, I think we've hired 13 people since we became a college, and we had some mind-blowing people, before that. But what's really interesting to me, and these folks know it, as an English professor, I keep running out of superlatives because I have to keep launching these emails to say, and now you won't believe this, So over a very short period of time, in the last 3 years, we've had, 2 professors each year winning university-wide prizes. Distinguished Teaching Award, Distinguished Research Award, Distinguished Mentor Award. Distinguished Mentor Award sitting right next to me. So these are big things, and then big national book prizes. So a student can come and study with somebody who won the best book award in African American literature and culture from the Modern Language Association, which is huge. Or I think of Annie Fukushima's work along with Darius's work, from the American Sociological Society. And I think of Leslie Fry, who just won a really big prize from the Society for Disability Studies. She's actually the best young researcher in the country this year. So I think it's an opportunity for students to come in a very close-knit environment, really get to know faculty who are doing just field-defining work.
Mhm.
And the last thing I'll say, because I know Wanda will want to join me in this thought, because we were both jumping on it, the student lounge, which is right
Yeah.
in our transformed
Yes.
space, is
Yeah.
one of our favorite things. It certainly is one of my favorite things as
Mhm.
dean, to come in the morning and walk into the space, and there are all these students, heads down, talking with each other, drawing on the whiteboard. We had to buy several whiteboards because they needed more whiteboard space to think with each other and plot and plan. Or you might come in and they're like knitting together, but then they're having some super serious intellectual conversation,
Right.
while they're knitting. So we were kind of going on
Yeah,
about the
because you
lounge,
don't know what
right?
you'll walk into a debate about intersectionality in STEM, right? Or the
Right.
role of
Scribble
trans
out the
in STEM.
window.
Yeah.
Or there'll be a debate about the academic senate resolutions, right,
Yes.
going on. And I just think it's really important then. It's actually one of my joys,
Yep.
right, of
Yeah.
entering into the Transform suite. Missed it so much during
Yes,
COVID-19. But because that space, I think, speaks to how important it is that Transform as a school and that we have a physical space on this campus with our name on it and a place for any of our students. Minors, majors, you've just taken a class and want a space to hang out, you get to be in that space. And I didn't realize how important that was going to be when we started the school. And like that's something I want people to know too about Transform, is how key just even that
Yes.
lounge space is
Mhm.
for our University of Utah campus.
Wow.
And most colleges, because they're made of departments, and we are too, the departments are on separate floors and you go into a separate suite. We are all in one space together, ethics studies, gender studies, and disability studies professors. So I think that is probably unique at
Yeah.
the University of Utah, or at least very uncommon.
Wow.
Yeah,
Mhm.
as a common space.
Well, we're really emphasizing this idea that I have that learning is a collective and community process, and what a beautiful way to illustrate that with what you shared. So some folks are probably tuning in, and how can they find you all? Where is this beautiful space? Like, how can they connect
Oh
with you
yeah,
all?
we didn't even say.
Well, we're in Gardner Commons.
Okay.
New building. I think the moniker of Gardner Commons early on was Agents of Change. And so
Oh, yeah,
I think
great.
we fit right in there and
Mhm.
transform.
Mhm.
We're on the 4th floor.
Okay.
So yeah, find us there.
Hopefully, we will find that we are still in the same space post-COVID, but
Yeah.
yeah. And Dan, I just want to say thank you to you. This was very exciting for us to be interviewed by you, and we love the relationship, of course, that Transform has with EDI, where you're doing incredible work. So thank you for your summer kindness to interview us. And I also want to say to anybody tuning in, thank you for coming to listen to us. I mean, you're the people that matter. You're where our heart is at. Really extending this thinking into the community is what it's all about.
Mhm.
So thank you for tuning in, and we hope to serve you in the best way possible. So much love.
Yeah.
Thank you all. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Ciao.